Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Creative Catholics, a podcast on creativity, faith, and the hidden life. I'm your host, Alex Cahill. As always, I want to thank Marie Miller for her music for our podcast. I also want to thank Riverside, which is sponsoring this episode. We use Riverside to record these episodes. If you have any audio files that you need to record or edit, I suggest looking at Riverside for their tools. You can check them out at the link in the description and in the show notes. As always, whatever you're working on today, whether it's knitting or gardening, or maybe some woodworking, or maybe you're even just making a meal, whatever creative project you're working on, I'm so glad you're here, and let's work on it together. I've been having so many amazing conversations with guests over this past month when I started this podcast. And I'm so inspired by what these guests have been saying, but I've noticed a unique trend when it comes to finding inspiration for creativity. So I've been speaking with homemakers and entrepreneurs and illustrators and writers and musicians and artists, and people are creating all sorts of beautiful things. And when I ask them where they find inspiration, the answers are actually rarely what I think we would expect. Nobody's ever said, I sit at my desk and I wait for a lightning bolt. Nobody said to me, I stare at a blank page until brilliance arrives, which I think often we do think about in the creative process. We kind of just stare at a blank wall and then lightning strikes or inspiration hits. Instead, the stories are often surprisingly ordinary. One guest found inspiration in an aquarium, another in a garden, one in a conversation. Someone else found inspiration while they were traveling, and another found inspiration in a very difficult season of suffering. Almost every guest has said some version of, I was simply paying attention to blank, and suddenly I saw something I'd never noticed before. And it got me wondering, is inspiration actually much closer to us than we think? For a long time, I treated inspiration like it was hiding from me, like it was something I had to chase or something I had to search for, something that lived out there, and then we have to go find it. But listening to these conversations has made me realize that as Catholic creatives, we start from a very different place. We believe creation means something. We believe the world around us was intentionally created by a God who is beauty and goodness and truth, which means every flower, every fish, every mountain, every story, every human person, every ordinary moment has something to teach us about the one who made it. The creation reveals the creator. And perhaps that's why Catholic creatives can find inspiration almost anywhere. I think one of the greatest tragedies of modern life is that we are surrounded by beauty, but we've stopped seeing it. We scroll, we rush, we consume, we fill our quiet moments, and then we wonder why we feel uninspired. But perhaps inspiration requires something most of us actually rarely practice anymore, which is stillness and attention and wonder. Because when we slow down and really, really look, the world is extraordinary. I've been thinking about this even more recently because of a very specific experience I've had. So there is a 1,000-year-old abbey not far from where my family and I live. The original abbey dates back centuries, but much of what stands today was rebuilt in the 19th and 20th centuries by a community of French monks. And if there's one thing the French have always seemed to understand, especially when it comes to the Catholic faith, is the importance of beauty. If we think of Notre Dame, if we think of the great monasteries, the cathedrals, the sacred art, the stained glass, the sculptures, the architecture that lifts our eyes and our hearts towards heaven, the French seem to really understand this and capture this. But every time we visit this abbey for Mass, I find myself drawn to the same thing. There's a stone relief, and the carver is unknown, but it was donated by an oblate of the monastery around 1915. And the funny thing is that it is positioned at the very highest point above the altar. It is right near the ceiling. And it's so high up that most people probably never actually notice it. And yet every time I attend Mass there, my eyes always look at it. Eventually, I decided I wanted to know more about this stone relief. I wanted to study it more closely. I wanted to bring some reminder of that beauty into my home. And that's when the adventure of this story began. I tried taking photographs of it, and it is impossible. It's simply too high. I checked the Abbey gift shop for postcards to see if somebody else was maybe able to get a photo of it, and there was nothing. I looked through books, nothing. I even asked the monks, and the monks said that they don't really have a good image of it because it's positioned directly behind the huge chain that supports the main altar candelabra. So the only reference I could find was buried in a very small pamphlet in the bookshop. And the pamphlet wasn't even about the carving itself. It briefly mentions it on the last page because it's about another statue on the grounds of the abbey. On the last page, there was this one blurry photograph taken at an angle, and that was it. And yet I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept returning to it. I kept wanting to look at it. I kept wanting to understand it. And eventually I had an idea. So my husband is very talented at drawing. So I asked if he could sketch the image based on the stone relief. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be an exact replica, but enough that I could use it as a basis for an embroidery project that I wanted to work on. And suddenly I was inspired. So I started creating what the frame's going to look like. I know what the embroidery itself is going to look like. I know which stitches I'm going to use and which places, which colors I want to use. And this got me thinking about something else. So artists have always borrowed from what came before them. Every cathedral builder was inspired by earlier cathedrals. Every iconographer learned from earlier artists. Every painter studied other painters. Every composer usually listened to other composers. Human creativity has always been a conversation across the generations. And I think sometimes we become so worried about originality that we forget this. Being inspired by something beautiful is not the same thing, though, as copying it. So I'm not talking about plagiarism. I'm not wanting to claim someone else's work as my own. But it's instead allowing beauty to move you so deeply that it becomes part of your own creative life. And this actually reminds me of a book that I've read a while ago now that's called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And before anyone panics, it doesn't talk about plagiarism. Okay, the whole premise of the book is that no artist creates in a vacuum. We're all influenced by the people who came before us. We learn from them, we study them, we admire them, and we are inspired by them and by their works. And then through the lens of our own experiences, we create something new. And I think that's exactly what happens when I look at that stone carving in the abbey. I'm not trying to reproduce it perfectly. I'm not claiming it as my own work. I'm not pretending I designed it. I'm just responding to it. I'm entering into a creative conversation that began over 100 years ago when the unknown stone carver created it. And interestingly, I think this highlights one of the things that makes human creativity different from artificial intelligence. So as we know, Pope Leo recently released his writings on AI, but it's been making the rounds on social media for a while now because obviously Catholic artists' work is threatened by AI, and that is a real thing. AI is simply lifting other images and copying them, and it makes it very, very difficult for artists. So I don't want to have any of this be confused with what AI is doing, because the primary difference is that human creativity is relational. It's personal. It's rooted in love, in admiration, in wonder, and in experience. When a medieval monk copied a manuscript, he wasn't simply reproducing information. He was entering into a tradition. When an iconographer paints an icon today, they're participating in something much larger than themselves. And so when I embroider an image inspired by a carving in an abbey, I'm responding to something that moved me spiritually. The goal isn't efficiency. The goal isn't content production. The goal is relationship. Because the reason I want to embroider that image isn't because I need another project. It's because every time I look at that carving, it draws my attention towards God. And I want to keep that reminder close. I think that's one of the beautiful things about human creativity. We don't simply process information. We encounter beauty and then we respond. And perhaps this is one of the greatest gifts of being Catholic, because we inherit over 2,000 years of beauty, 2,000 years of art, architecture, music, literature, prayer, symbolism, sacred imagination. We're surrounded by inspiration. But here's the part that really struck me when I was thinking about all of this. I wasn't creating this embroidery to sell. I wasn't creating it for social media. I'm not creating it for content or to have a product. I simply wanted to live with that image. And I wanted that particular scene that had spoken to me so deeply to become part of my daily life. I wanted to be reminded of it every time I walked past. And I think that's another thing that we've forgotten as creatives, that not everything we create has to be monetized. It does not have to become a business. It does not have to be shared with the world. Sometimes we create because something beautiful has drawn us closer to God and we want to remain close to it. And perhaps that's what inspiration really is, not the search for the next big idea, but paying attention to the things that God keeps drawing our eyes towards, the things we can't stop noticing, the things that stir wonder, the things that make us pause, the things that draw our hearts closer to Him. Because the carving that captivated me may not captivate you. The flower that stops one person in their tracks may go entirely unnoticed by another, and that's okay, because inspiration is often deeply personal. And this, I think, is one thing I would really, really want to highlight in this world of AI. If you're looking for inspiration, please don't go to ChatGPT and ask them for inspiration. Go outside. Go to a church. Read a book. Look in old books for patterns from ancient civilizations. Let your wonder find the inspiration for you through the beauty that God has given us. Look at something really, really close, and I bet you'll be inspired. Because inspiration is an invitation. It's God drawing our attention towards something particular, something unique that He created, He designed. So perhaps the question isn't, where do I find inspiration? I think the question is, what has God already placed in front of me that I haven't noticed yet? Because if creation truly does reveal the Creator, then we are surrounded by inspiration every single moment of the day. The challenge isn't finding it. The challenge is slowing down long enough to see it and respect it. Until next time, stay creative and keep making what matters most.